Coaching in Session.
Your exclusive destination for unparalleled personal and professional growth.
With your host, Michael Rearden.
Whether you choose to live within limits or break free, your mindset journey begins here.
Welcome, DK Kang, to Coaching in Session. How are you doing today?
I am doing well. Thank you for having me on your show.
Of course. Today we're going to be talking about your book and some other works. Your book is called The Mindset Metamorphosis, and we're going to be diving into that mindset. But your mindset is going to be one for the books. And I'm interested in learning more about what kept you going in those dark moments in your life, because in America or just in the world generally, there are going to be people who are going through it. And through it can be, they can have a hardship in life, whether it be personal, finances, or an array of other issues that a person could be dealing with. And I know sometimes when we're going through these personal issues and problems, we feel like we're in this battle alone. And you are a testament that you are not alone. And then you are a testament that you can get through it. So with all that, can you tell us who you are, what you do, and of course, how you help people?
Yeah, so my name is DK Kang. I'm an author, also kind of a jack of all trades. I've done martial arts all my life. So, there's a lot of mindset things there. I'm a licensed massage therapist helping performance athletes and recovery. I also got a certification in HVAC. So, yeah, I'm kind of a jack of all trades, but really, I'm really advocate for people changing their mindset because I feel like that's where everything starts, is in your mind.
I think of our journeys in life can be very similar to this idea of jack of all trades, because when I started, I was doing accounting, business finance. I went off to get a degree in education. And even though all of those things might be in my past, they influence who I am or who I became today. So martial arts is a great thing. I have a 3-year-old son. He's a little bit too young for martial arts right now, but when he turns around the 5 age mark, he's going hard. He's going to go all the way until he's probably done with high school, definitely. But if he wants to continue even into his mid to late 20s, I am all for it and I'll pay for it. He doesn't even have to pay for anything. But this idea that you can learn so much from one of your jacks of trades. So you can learn from being a massage therapist, or you can learn from being an accountant, or you can learn from being a martial artist, or you can learn from being an author, because those things help tell your story better. And your story is one that is unique, because most people, when they have a hardship in their life, they will throw in the towel. They will say, why me? Why is this happening? All of these things that feel so personal, credit card debt, and we have all of these things piling on, and it just feels like a turmoil that is left for us. But then again, you are a man who has went through the challenges of life and then are able to tell other people that they can not only go through them, but they can get through them. So if you could, can you tell us a little bit about your journey so far in life?
Yeah, my journey's been a roller coaster for sure. So kind of going back, a brief story about me, fertility for about 10 years. Long story short, my wife ended up having endometriosis. It spread. She had emergency surgeries, things like that. And they ended up doing a total hysterectomy. This was during COVID. Kind of flash forward to 2024. My wife is diagnosed with breast cancer. It's about January of 2024. She's starting treatment in February of 2024. And then I'm reading this book called The Breast Cancer Husband. And it's basically saying, hey, be there for your wife for all her appointments, doctor's appointments, chemotherapy, whatever it is. And then at the end of the book, it says, hey, let your employer know that your wife has cancer and that you need to be there for her and to have a flexible work schedule. And so, I was really reluctant. I was like, I don't really want to tell my employer what's going on, like personal stuff. But I was like, hey, the book said to do this, so I'm going to go do it. And I told my three managers, I was like, hey, I'll work weekends. I'll pick up extra shifts. I'll work late, whatever, or come in early so I could be at my wife's appointments. And this was February 1st of 2024. And after that meeting, they're like, yeah, we can accommodate you. And then literally a week after that, they decided to lay me off from my job. And at this point, my wife has already quit her job because, she's going to be going through cancer treatments, things like that. And so, there was a point where Both of us didn't have jobs. I didn't get another job until December of 2024. So there was 10 months of no income. And at this point, I don't have health insurance. And my wife has started chemo treatments. We get for one chemo treatment, we get a bill for $80,000 with no health insurance. Luckily, I made a bunch of phone calls and we got Cobra insurance with, it's a high premium with high deductible. But we didn't have to pay the $80,000. But at the same time, it was with all radiation and chemotherapy, doctor visits. A year. So her treatment was a year-long process from February 2024 to February 2025. And so, we would have racked up over $1 million in medical debt. But because we didn't have any income coming in for 10 months, we still amassed $60,000 worth of living expenses, medical debt, things like that. And so, we're still going through it right now. But, one thing that we had to really work on was our mind. And, when I heard the news that they're letting me go, I came home that night, told my wife, hey, job let me go. And I don't know if it was because cancer diagnosis or whatever. I'm not going to try to figure that out or whatever. It's in the past. And so, so faith is a big part of my wife and my wife and I's life. And so we prayed that night, but we didn't ask the question, why is this happening to us, God? Why? We didn't ask, why did my wife get cancer? Why did I lose my job? Whatever it was. We didn't ask that. Instead, we asked, why not us, God? And then a follow-up question was, well, who can we help in the future because we're going through this? And so that's something that we had to reframe. And so of course, I didn't have a job. I'm just journaling one day at the doctor's office while my wife's getting chemo or seeing the doctor, things like that. And, when you hear the word cancer, your world is turned upside down. And especially a job loss that comes with it. Your world is turned upside down in so many ways. And so I was just journaling. And that journaling turned into, I kind of came back to that question, well, who can I help? And then my journaling it was inspired going into a book because I'm my book's mainly about, it's transforming your mind, but it's also how to deal with stress and being overwhelmed and feeling stuck. Because for me, I was that person. I was that one that was really, really stressed because cancer, job loss. How am I going to pay for things like that? I was overwhelmed with just life, and I felt stuck because this was something that was out of my control. And so the journaling turned into my book, Mindset Metamorphosis. And so, I tell the readers hey, start small. And, I talk about reframing your mindsets or reframing your failures or, something I had to do was I had to reframe instead of asking why us, I reframed it to why not us and who can we help? And I talk about that in my book. I also talk about, a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. A fixed mindset is hey, I've got all the answers, or I've done this job for 25 years. I don't need to learn anything new. I know what I'm doing. That's kind of the fixed mindset. Versus a growth mindset is you're always willing to learn. And so for me, what we had to do because of cancer, we had to have that growth mindset. We dug deep into books on who's done cancer, who's beat it, what did they do. We read a lot of nutrition books. There's this book that we read. It's called Chris Beat Cancer. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Chris work. No. But so his book, he was 25, 26 years old, really young guy at the time. He checks into the ER with severe abdominal pain, and ER comes back with a bunch of test results. The doctor tells him, hey, you have stage 3 colon cancer and you have about 6 to 8 months to live. And if you do surgery, radiation, chemotherapy, all that, you might have a year to live. And he actually just did the surgery and then he changed his nutrition, and his nutrition actually reversed his cancer. And so, we had to ask that question as not how, but who Like, who has walked through cancer? What did they do? How did they beat it? And so we had to implement that for ourselves. That was that growth mindset on, let's just read about cancer and let's read about what people's doing. Let's read more about nutrition. And we just took that action and we applied it to our own lives. And, give you an example, about 3 weeks ago, so my wife is cancer-free now because it was a year-long treatment. But because it was an aggressive cancer, she has to be on surveillance for her oncologist and other doctors for the next 2 years. So we just did a follow-up surveillance checkup about 3 weeks ago. And doctor comes in and just was like, wow, you look amazing. Whatever you're doing, keep doing what you're doing, because you are the best looking patient that I have seen in a very, very long time. And, honestly, that spoke volume to us because we believe that, the nutrition is a big component of like energy wise and having those nutrients in our blood system. And so, like for us, we're like, wow, for a doctor to say that, we're doing something right. And so, because we went on a completely whole food plant-based diet after reading Chris speak about cancer. And so when you hear something like that from a professional, you're like, okay, I'm doing something right. And again, that starts with that mind. We could have easily been like, oh, you guys are the doctors and have that fixed mindset. Oh, you guys cure cancer. You guys know what you're doing. But we took it upon ourselves. Like we had ownership for our own cancer journey for my wife. And we did whatever it took to be healthier. So, that's something I talk about in my book is that fixed versus growth mindset. And for me, I've done martial arts all my life. I still do it. So I've done martial arts for 34 years now. And so, there's a lot of mindset training in there, how to deal with stress, like meditation. I talk about meditation in my book, starting small with do like 30 seconds of meditation and then build up. And, one thing with martial arts, for me, there's a lot of parallels with martial arts in life. When you're sparring, quote unquote, like controlled fighting, right? When those like punches and kicks are coming at you, at your face, at your body, at your ribs, how are you going to respond? Because it can be scary, right? Same thing with life. When you hear a cancer diagnosis or when you hear a job loss or financial issues, things like that, it can be scary. And most people, what they want to do is run away. And so with martial arts, well, if you keep running away from those kicks, you're never going to face your fear and you'll never know how to respond of whether you block, dodge, or duck, or attack before they attack. Mm-hmm. And the same thing with life. It's when those unexpected kicks or punches come at you, it's how do you respond? And when my wife was going through cancer treatments, I got a lot of, nothing to toot my own horn or anything, but a lot of the medical staff they just like pulled me aside and said, like, we just admire you and we are inspired by you because you are there for your wife for every single appointment. And for them, they just they see it so much where the husband just bails out. They're like, yeah, a lot of husbands, they just file for divorce or they just don't show up. And as soon as they hear their wife is going through chemotherapy, they just like, yep, you deal with yourself. And so, that's part of that, like facing that fear, that challenge in front of you. And, something my instructor told me when I was really young that really stuck with me. And, I was like maybe 8 or 9 years old or something like that. By this point, I'm already a black belt. And so, he tells me every time you walk in that door, you are a white belt. And I had to look at him like, are you crazy? Like, what are you talking about? But he had to explain it of like having that mentality, that mental fortitude of like, hey, you don't have all the answers and you just need to be humble because yeah, you might be a black belt, but that doesn't mean anything. There's so much to learn, whether through skills or books and it applies to life. And so, but he was just saying like, hey, you can always get better with your technique. You can always get better endurance or, for martial arts. But same thing, reading books, you can always get better. There's always something to learn. And just having that white belt mentality of like, hey, I'm a blank slate. Like I'm willing to learn whatever it is that I'm reading or whatever I'm trying to do. And so, that again, that starts with that mind. And so, of course, that's that growth mindset. And so, yeah, like martial arts is a big part of my life. I also talk about in my book about habits, like habit stacking. Let's say you brew coffee every single day. Like that's a habit you do. Like old school, like you use a filter with coffee grounds and, it takes like 2 minutes to brew or whatever. And let's say during that 2 minutes, your end goal is to get in better shape, right? Like, hey, I want to lose 10 pounds, but you're like, I don't want to go to the gym or I don't know where to start, things like that. Well, during that 2 minute time frame, knock out one push-up. That's it. Just start small. One push-up, and just think about how many push-ups you can do in an entire year just by brewing your coffee. That's 365 push-ups that you would have not done, even if, because instead of scrolling on your phone for 2 minutes while your coffee's brewing, and you could do this for anything, like check an email. And I think my example in the book is like someone's checking their email, but they want to add more hydration into their daily habit. So every morning they turn on the computer, right before they check emails, they drink a glass of water, and it just become a habit. And now that person is drinking more water throughout the day just because they're mindful of it, Those are some of the things that I talk about in the book, because these are things that helped me as I was going through life, of all the craziness and the challenges of cancer and job loss. And so for me, it was a way for me to want to help people.
Yeah, I love your story. And it's one reason why I wanted to have you on, because your story has many similarities in many people's lives. I can think of just clients that I've had that had to tell their workplace that, hey, my wife is going through cancer, and they get let go also. And it's not because they're mad at the person or that they're mad at the wife. It's just that they have a role to fill, a spot to fill. And it's difficult for a business, especially, to say, okay, let me do my best to accommodate you. How is it going to be accommodated without hiring someone else for the position? And then, of course, now you have to pay 2 salaries instead of 1. So I understand where it comes from a business sense, but then at the same time, if we put all of this together, we have what life is, right? Sometimes in a martial arts fight, you might get knocked down or knocked out. There's a referee. They say, hey, stop, right? Stops the fight. In life, we don't have those referees. So if you get knocked down, life is going to keep on pummeling you until you're nothing. And you have 2 choices: to take the beating or to say, I'm going to get back up, right? There's no one who's going to stop the fight. And so you have to be the person that says, okay, I'm going to get back up, and we equip ourselves. And one of the reasons I probably don't know who Chris is, and I might know Chris maybe just in passing or heard of the book, because a lot of the mindset work that I do is this idea of, yeah, sure, doctors are great, but it doesn't mean that science is going to be everything. And I'm going to get into that in just a moment. Because if I was living in a world where I had cancer, my wife had cancer, I wanted to let everyone know I would equip myself with every single tool in the world to make sure that I'm not only equipped to handle it, but to beat it. Okay? Because I know sometimes people are like, I just want to get through this. No. You want to get past it. Okay? You want to be able to say, like, oh, I can't remember feeling bad anymore because I feel so great today. And there's so many people who are just going through that ringer right now. And it is difficult for them, especially when you have naysayers, especially people who you trust, like a doctor, and they're saying you have 6 months left to live, or you have a year left to live, or you have a year of suffering of chemo. And I know how difficult that can be, where you look in the mirror and you're not the same person, right? You're losing your hair, you're losing weight. And then so now you're getting fatigued, your mind is getting strained. And then you wonder, can I keep on fighting? And this is where a lot of people, they quit. This idea of how you stuck with your wife during this time is a testament to a strong marriage. Because most people, when it comes to any little hiccup, oh, we got some finance problems, oh, there's some infidelity, you lost your job, there's something that goes on that just breaks the relationship apart. I understand it's easier to throw away something that's broken, but when you take your vows for marriage, I'm going to get into marriage a little bit, is until death do you part, not until you don't feel like doing your part. And exactly. I talk about this all the time on the podcast, because if we just reframe what we're feeling, because oftentimes when we're going through a hardship or our partner is going through a hardship, we're like, why do I have to fight this battle for them or with them? Like I didn't
Yeah.
sign up for this. And I understand that mindset. But when you go through it, right, you're going to get those words of inspiration and of admiration from other people who see what you're doing. And it's not just the marriage part. It's not just going to the doctor part. It's that you are showing up part. Oftentimes when we can just see ourselves in life, we can see if we're showing up. But sometimes people, they just go in the rug, go in the closet. They say, I'm not going to worry about showing up anymore because, what's the point of showing up? And oftentimes most people become invisible in life. So that's the same people who are doing 9 to 5, who are just kind of going through life. Everything seems mundane. There's nothing new. They might go on a cruise every other year or something like that. And they call that life. And they're wondering what's missing. They call me and they say, hey, Michael, I feel stuck. I feel lost. I feel like there's something else for me. And of course, there is something else for you. It's just that you're not willing to go for it yet. Sometimes people need that deep, harsh trauma to shake them awake and say, hey, pay attention. And that's what happened to you when you were like, how can I start to help people? How can I start to implement something where they can learn from my wisdoms and my history and my journey rather than just simply having to go through it blind? Of course, we can go into the library, we can go into the record books of people who have beat cancer, people who have succeeded, people who have overcome serious amounts of debt. We can do all of that work. But at the end of the day, when it's presented to us from a basis to basis, a person to person, we can see this person do it, we can see this person do it. And all of this is to say, going back to the science bit now, with the science, where scientists back when, let's say 80s or whatever, I forget the date, Roger Bannister broke the 4-minute mile. He was told by scientists, doctors, you can't do this. Your heart's going to explode. Okay? It can't be done. Right? Sure enough, he's like, all right, thank you. I'm listening, but I'm not listening. So he does it anyway. And sure enough, within 2 weeks, several people also do a sub 4-minute mile. This wasn't by accident. They just had to see that it was achievable. They had to see that it was possible. And oftentimes what happens, especially in doctors, your doctor, you are the healthiest person I've seen in a long time. Because if they don't see someone run that sub 4-minute mile, their mindset becomes, you have 6 months, you have 1 year, if you're lucky. Okay. So their mindset becomes skewed. It's not because they're bad people. It's just that they have seen losses more than wins. And so here we have a win. You are a win. And it's important that we understand that. And one of the books you have is the Kimchi Connection Cookbook, right? You talk about health. You talk about how a person can go back into their natural state of diet and being rather than just all of these processed foods. And you have a full set of data or a full set of tools that a person can implement to say, hey, let's start to make some changes in their life. But I do want to get into some questions because you had multiple choices to make. You could have given up when you got a black belt. You could have given up when your wife got sick. You could have given up when you lost your job, but you didn't, right? So there has to be some level of resilience there. What was it for you?
Resilience. I don't know. For me, I'm one to kind of do hard things. Like challenging things, like physically or mentally, spiritually. Give you an example. Are you familiar with what a Spartan race is? Yeah. Okay. So, in 2023, I did a 50K ultra, a 50K ultra Spartan race is like, 32 miles, 33 miles, something like that, with 60 obstacles. And so during this race, everything that went wrong, that could go wrong, went wrong. Right. So I dropped a boulder on my toe. My toe was blue for 6-8 months or whatever it was. I had a nosebleed. My tracker got caught on one of the obstacles. I had to run an extra half a mile to go pick it back up. I lost my gloves. I tore my hands on one of the obstacles. Like all my calluses were gone. I had rope burn. I had way too many Cliff Bars and had digestive issues. I brought 3 hydration packs with me, like 3 Camelbacks with me. So extra weight. All these things that were going wrong, that could go wrong, went wrong, right? And so as I'm doing this, you do for the 50K, you do a 25K with 30 obstacles, then you start back over and you go do the same loop over again, the second loop. And so as I'm on the second loop, all these people are saying that I'm passing, like, man, this course is just way too hard, or I'm never gonna finish, or I'm too tired, things like just a lot of negative self-talk, right? And so for me, I did not listen to them. And I do talk about negative self-talk in my book and how to overcome it, with like positive affirmations, things like that. But for me, my mindset was already, I can and I will finish this race, despite of all the things that went wrong. I don't care what went wrong, whatever. Like if I need to crawl past that finish line, I will. So a 50K ultra is about a 50% fail rate. So, and I say that because there was about 600 people that went in to the ultra, and about 324 people finished at the actual finish line. But it has to do with that mindset, because they've already said, I can't do this, or this is too hard. And like, I don't think they had that mental fortitude or even the resilience to think that far ahead, or to even want that part of like finishing the finish line. And so for me, I was like, I can and I will finish this. I mean, it took me 12 and a half hours to finish, but I still finished it despite of everything. But, when we start thinking in our own minds, like, hey, this is too hard, or life is too hard, or I can't face cancer, or I can't get out of debt. Well, that's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And as you think it, you say it, it will naturally come to you in whatever you think or even say out loud. And so, I think doing hard things, it helps you build that resilience up. Like it's like almost like a muscle. As you use it more, I didn't start out doing a 50K, or I didn't start out, doing hard things, but those things taught me in life, like, hey, you're going to be facing some challenging things. For me, I'm really spiritual. I talk about morning routines. A morning routine for me is I read the Bible every day. And the Bible says, in this world, you'll have trouble. And this is Jesus talking, but take heart, I have overcome the world. And, for me, a favorite, my hero, my person that I looked up as a kid, I still look up today, is Jackie Chan. And, in the movie in Karate Kid, the one that he did, he says, life will knock us down, but we can choose whether to stand back up. And it's always a choice, right? We have the choice to have that negative self-talk, like, oh, I can't finish this race. Oh, I can't face cancer. I can't get out of debt. Or we can choose to, hey, I'm going to find a way to finish that race. I'm going to find a way to beat cancer. I'm going to find a way to get out of debt. And it's this choice, And so, but I think the easy route is everybody wants to quit, because it's so easy to do. And because we don't have that resiliency. Like for me, I grew up doing martial arts. So 5 years old, there's a lot of discipline. There's a lot of you get in trouble. My instructor was like, all right, do wall sit for 10 minutes, or do knuckle push-ups, and I'm like, oh, okay, like I got in trouble, but that built up my resilience. And so I truly believe that everybody wants things in life so easy, but they're not willing to work at it. And so like my book is about taking action. Don't just read something, but actually take that action. Like for me, a quote that I came up with is it's in my logo, it's in my website. It says, "Is to feed your mind, fuel your action, and find your fire." Feeding your mind, that's reading books, that's educating yourself about new things, learning, growing, fueling that action. Take that action. Don't just read a book and just like, oh, it goes back on the shelf and not do anything with it. With martial arts, you can't read a book to say how to punch. You can read a book how to punch, but you don't know how to actually apply it in real life. So that's where the action has to come. And finding your fire. I mean, fire can be good thing or a bad thing. It can keep you warm, or if it gets out of control, well, it can also be very disastrous. So finding where your fire is of, hey, like, how can I help the world out better? Or finding your purpose is like another word for it. And so your question about resiliency, like, I think over years, I've just kind of built that resilient muscle up.
I think of just people now and how they're viewing this, because one of the things I know they're probably thinking, is, especially if they're older, I'm too old to do something. Martial arts is like something I can't do. If I started when I was younger, maybe it would have been great. Or if I was in better shape, I can do something. So like right now, they already have the limits in their mind. So it's just like, for me, I urge those people who, if you do have those things in your mind right now, just to let them go. Like they're not helpful, right? Instead of worrying about all the obstacles you have, look at all the roads and the doors that are open right now.
Yeah.
Because if you are just worrying about what you can't do, then you're not going to be focusing on what you can do. So I would rather you focus on what you can do, because it might not be martial arts. Maybe you have no interest in martial arts. Maybe you're a pacifist, right? And so you don't have to look at martial arts. And I know we're talking about martial arts, but I don't want you just to think martial arts is the only way to get resilience, right? There's multiple ways for someone to get resilience.
Yeah. And, you talk about age, right? So I've done 10 Spartan races in the last 4 years or something. There was one race I was at, there was an 80-year-old doing his 80th race, and it was a 21K beast. So like age is not, it's just an excuse. Like, if an 80-year-old can do a 21K, a half a marathon with 25 obstacles, I'm like, wow, that's impressive. But he already had it in his mind, it's like, hey, I'm going to do this. And he'd done 80 of them. So I'm like, man, like this guy's awesome. So, yeah.
Anything that stops you from doing something is infinite. And it's going to be an excuse, right? Now, some excuses could be valid, okay? For example, I have rules. Like if I'm sick, I don't go to the gym because I work out really hard and I don't want to get other people sick, number one.
Yeah.
And then number two, my body is going to be having to not only heal from the gym workout, but then also from me being sick. And I remember I did it once, and this is where I made this rule, where I was like, I had a little baby cold. And all of a sudden, I go to the gym. I was like, work out. And the next day, like, I got hit by a tractor trailer. I said, what happened? And I started to put one and two together. I said, I didn't rest. So there's times you have to use common sense, people. Like you have to be able to say, all right, I'm resting because I know I need it rather than I want it. Yeah. Most people, they want it easy. They want the rest. They want things given to them. They want the easy road. And sometimes the easy road is going to be pleasurable for some time, but at the end of life, like, can you really say that you did some 5Ks and all these other people are doing these 21 to 50K runs, and you have to ask yourself, like, was my journey enough? Like, did I push myself enough? And maybe you did, right? Maybe you pushed yourself and 5K was all you could do. But if you don't even try, if you don't even attempt, how can you say that was your limit? Because oftentimes when people reach their limit, something happens, right? You have to give yourself a question. You have to say, is this limit the full of my capabilities, right? Like the max of what I'm capable of? Or is this the foundation for me to build upon and propel myself forward? And if you can just ask yourself just those simple logics of, I hit a roadblock, I lost, right? Maybe you lost a job, but you can ask yourself the same question. Is this my limit? Okay. And oftentimes you're going to say no. But of course, there'll be little whispers out your head saying, yeah, take it easy. You work real hard. But don't listen to that voice, right? That voice is just trying to keep you comfortable, right? And in life, comfort is, like I said, it's nice for a while. But when you're pushing yourself, that's when life truly gets to get beautiful. I think of just moments when I was doing things like, I'm like, this is extremely difficult, whether it be rock climbing or doing Bikram yoga, just some of the easier things, where I'm like, wait 1 second, how many people do this, right? I think there's like a statistic of, I think like after 30, less than 5% of the population ever run again. It's just like after you hit a certain age, you stop running. And then it's like, I think after 18, it's like only 22% around there read still. It's like, so you're done with school all of a sudden. As soon as you turn 18, you go off into the real world. You don't have to go to college. It's just like, where are we getting these ideas from? And oftentimes we think of when we're younger, especially, is the hardships that we have to go through in order to get to where we want to be. I can't tell you how many times I thought, like, I can't wait to be an adult so I don't have to study and do tests anymore. I thought about it almost every day I went to school. But here I am reading, writing, and I'm just doing it because I love it now, right? So I encourage people to find what they love, because once you find what you love, then you're not going to see it as a chore. You're not going to see it as a hardship. You're going to see it as an opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned 3 things that I talked about in my book. For me, I talked about boundaries. You were kind of saying like when your limit is, setting those boundaries. Like for us, when my wife was going through cancer treatments, like we couldn't be out in public because she was immune compromised. So, we couldn't be at church and we couldn't be at, just like parties, things like that. And I was just like, hey, like this is our boundary. And not saying this is an excuse or something, but hey, like my wife is immune compromised. Like we just can't at the moment. And so, yeah, setting boundaries. But then you talked about sleep, right? I talk about mindful sleep in my book about like, hey, take, an hour before you actually go to bed. Like, let's say your bedtime's 9 p.m. or 10 p.m. or whatever it is. Set an hour before that, start winding down, shut down all electronics. Because, when we have electronics, especially today, with emails, with YouTube, with Netflix, whatever it is, social media, we have the blue light and it affects our stress, it affects our sleep. And so when we have those blue lights entering in our system, in our eyes, in our brain thinks that, hey, it's still daylight. Oh, you need to be up. And so just like start reading a book an hour before, start winding down. We're going to spend a third of our lives asleep. We need good sleep. Here in the United States, I don't know about other countries, but we do a time change of spring forward or fall back, right? Usually science shows that when we do that time change, there's more heart attacks, more car accidents on that Sunday when we do that time change. And it's only an hour. Think about how that affects you throughout your week when I'm going to stay up till midnight, but I need to be up at, 5 o'clock in the morning. Instead of getting, 6, 7, 8 hours of sleep, you're only getting 5 hours of sleep. And then that's compounding throughout the week. Like, oh, I need to send more emails or I need to get up early or whatever. And I mean, man, your body and your mind is going to feel it. And so, sleep is super important. I do talk about those things, and it is really important for our minds because when we don't get that sleep, well, our minds is just fatigue, it's tired, and can't think straight,
Yeah, definitely. And you can always, when you go back to listen to this, you can always drop it in the comments, like the first comment or something. And then you can say, I know the third thing, you can put it down there because I know it's going to be tough to do it now. But either way, regardless of that, I love this idea of the 1 hour before bed to wind down. Is something that I call a hack in life. Where if you truly want to change, you begin with that small thing, right? You could begin with journaling, some meditation work, of course, but just that 1 hour before bed, I mean, it will change you so drastically. When you look back within a year of just doing that 1 hour before bed, you will be a different person. I'm not only talking about body and mind, I'm talking about everything spiritually too. It's just you gain something from that hour. And what I did in my hour, when I was truly into change and like enhancing myself, I read. I said, I'm going to read. And so I would go to bed. My bedtime was like 10 or 11, either or. And I would wake up at 4 in the morning to go to the gym, like 4 to 5, depending on whatever I had to do that next day. But it was around the same time. And when I sat down around 8 o'clock in my bed, I just wanted to read. And I just wanted to consume as much knowledge as possible. I read all of the famous personal development books. I don't know how many I have on my list right now. You can get my list, revenconcepts.com. But I read hundreds of books that year where I was just like, I'm going to consume as much information as possible so it can help me move forward. And sometimes when I'm reading, I get a little tired. So I don't make it to the 10 o'clock or the 11 o'clock. So I might go to sleep at 9 and it's fine because I wake up at 4 and I say, okay, now I feel rejuvenated, I feel rested. And I also feel equipped, right? I gave myself something the night before rather than I'm scrolling through TikToks that I'll forget or YouTube videos that don't even matter. I understand entertainment is there to entertain you, but in life, you are not only truly wanting to be entertained, you want to go live. And so you have to do the things that are going to help you live more abundantly. And oftentimes, if you leave your phone, you get to live so much better. And I love leaving my phone places by accident. So I have 2 phones, business and stuff, but I leave my phone in the car. I leave my phone at home. And it's funny because my wife's like, why do you have your phone? I go, well, why do I need to have my phone? And so she typically has her phone with her. And I can always just go up to somebody, have a conversation. Like, it's so strange to have a conversation with someone. Excuse me, sir. Excuse me, ma'am. Can I borrow your phone? I can go inside a business. Hey, my car is on the side of the road. Can I borrow your phone or something? Like I can do that. Where people think where they just need to be, again, so independent or like so self-sufficient where they can't rely on someone. And one of the things you need to do is be able to rely on people, especially when you're down and out, when you are hurting. And very similar to how your sensei was saying, when you come in that door, you're a white belt. It's your ability to always be humble and your ability to be a lifelong learner. We're here to learn, not here to say, all right, I learned enough. And now you simply just kind of coast through things. And this is the mindset of people when they reach 65 and they retire. I already lived my life. And this is why these people died within 10 years of retirement. So you work your ass off for 65 years to only live 10 years and what you thought was joy. Why not start to live enjoy today? Why not start to look at what you can do and start to enact that vision? Where I understand it could be challenging, but as you can see, DK's journey was definitely challenging. And I know people who are listening to this, your journey is challenging as well, but it doesn't mean your journey is over. It doesn't mean your story is done. You get to finish the ending. You get to tell whatever story you want at it. And then, of course, share that wisdom with other people, because that is what beats science. Because the human factor cannot be measured. Because if I say humans can only run 27 miles an hour, right? I did all the studies, I did all the science, I looked at all the body parts and ligaments. Guess what? Someone's going to say, I don't believe that. And they're going to start running 29 miles an hour. And so the science that I did was not only debunked, but it's proven that people have no limits. You have no limits. You get to decide what your limits are. So as we begin to wrap up, of course, DK, we had a great conversation. I love hearing about your story and your books and everything that's going on. And I'm so happy about the happy ending of your family. It's so important that we see that as well. If you could, can you give us some final words, and then please tell people how they can find you, reach out, and then, of course, get your book if that's what you really think is going to start to help change some lives in the world.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I would say I'm not at a happy ending just yet. I mean, my wife, she's cancer-free, but because of all the cancer treatments, she ended up having cataracts. And now after she had cataract surgery, she has some nerve damage from the chemo treatments and things like that. So we're still trying to deal with that. We're still trying to pick up from debt, medical debt. But my choice is I'm not giving up, and I'm, putting one step in front of the other and moving forward. Yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody's life is happy ending just yet, because my story's not done yet. But some words of wisdom, I would say, start small and never stop learning. I think there's a quote that says, I don't know who said it, but maybe Zig Ziglar or something like that. And it says, if you're not growing, you're dying. Maybe it was Ben Franklin, Albert Einstein, someone like that. But if you're not growing, you're dying. So read books, learn, and take action, however small it is, whether it's in a business, whether it's in your fitness, whether it's your health. Take some form of action and be consistent in it. There's that, example being like small and consistency. You take like a large rock and you just pour a bunch of water on it all at once, right? What happens? The rock just gets wet. But what happens when you just do one drop every single second hitting that rock with that water? You're going to have a hole within a year in that rock. But that's just that small consistency, instead of just like, I need to do one giant like marathon and just try to pour a bunch of water on that rock. Like, that's not life, So small consistency. Where people can find me, I'm on all the socials, but I don't really respond. I just kind of post stuff, but I'm trying to get better at it. But if you want to reach me, you can go to my website, dkkang.com. And then if you want to try to message me, I usually respond pretty quick with email. So my email is dk@dkkang.com. And then you can find my first chapter of my Mindset Metamorphosis on my newsletter. So if you sign up for my newsletter, I'm giving away the first chapter for free as a free download to start helping anyone that just feels stuck or whatever, start implementing some things in their life. And it's just there for a free download. And my newsletter is just stories about my life and the lessons that I learned and how people can start applying those lessons in their own lives, whether it be professionally or personally, or whether it be, fitness or nutrition, just mindset shifts, That's kind of what my newsletter is about. And that's newsletter.dkkang.com is where you can sign up for that. And then if you want the actual book, it's on Amazon. It's on Audible. It's on Kindle. And there's a paperback for it. And then my other book, which is the Kimchi Connection Cookbook, which is, it talks about integrating kimchi into different dishes and also how the gut-brain connection is really connected together and how kimchi can help with that, with probiotics and with like the nutrients and things like that. Because our immune system, it's about 70% is in our gut. So if you have a leaky gut, things like that, probiotics will help, like kimchi and fermented foods. So that's kind of where that's at. But it's under my actual name, which is DK Kang, just trying to keep it traditional with Korean. So that's where you can find the books.
Perfect. And I'm going to make it easy for everyone. All the links will be right down below so you can peruse at your own leisure and you can take what you need. And I'm a big believer in more tools for the toolbox, because when you can equip yourself with so many different tools and so many different mindsets, you can get the job done so much easier. Imagine having a Phillips and you needed a flathead. It's going to be tough, right? You can get the job done maybe, but the idea is make sure you're equipped. And of course, giving yourself different books, different mindsets, and learning about different stories, very similar to DK's story today. So I want everyone to understand that don't lose hope, don't lose faith. Your journey is just the beginning. And I do want to thank you, DK, for coming on, of course, spending some time and talking about your story today.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.